Okay, hello everybody. It's Andrew Petersen, and welcome to this slightly later version of G'day Glasgow. All right, let's kick off. So, well, what can one say? It's figures that matter, people, doesn't it? Or rather, the actions and the decisions of the parties to the negotiations that need to ensure that those figures, being the words and the numbers that will go into the final text and finalise the Paris rulebook, that actually matter. Let us begin by acknowledging once again that this is being broadcast to you from the land of the Camaragal people, and that we acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. And we particularly welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who may be joining us today. Let's go straight to the Good Cop Barometer. And I've updated it as at the last few minutes, actually. So hopefully it is as accurate as we can possibly make it to share. And by dint of that, it becomes incredibly small, which is unfortunate. But the drafts are being debated in Glasgow, and the announcement by the United States and China has that they've agreed to work together to increase their climate ambition in 2020 is all good. But is it good enough to bring COP26 over the finishing line? The latest is that the Article 6 negotiations seem to be very much on track, as do the areas of loss and damage and transparency, and they are progressing. But the questions about who's going to be responsible for governing, particularly loss and damage, well, that's still very much up in the air. And what about those negotiations on climate finance? The smoke signals aren't so good. But here's my thought as we wait and we sit for this particular outcome. Doesn't a deal at COP also need to set the foundations for reforming the global financial architecture and effectively move towards a Bretton Woods 2.0 world, a world where there is a brand new monetary order, one where the currency is that of carbon? This new landscape, could it be one that responds to the urgency of climate change and enhances the global financial capacity to mobilize tens of trillions of dollars, as both India and the African nations have been suggesting? For that, however, we actually need a fundamentally new role and new rules for multilateral development banks and international development finance institutions, which include the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And of course, our own central banks need to play a role, and they are in fact playing that role around identifying and hopefully alleviating the possible carbon asset bubble and the crash that could make the global financial crisis look like a walk in the park. So surely the critical changes that are needed to provide access to finance to those who really need it, and avoid the condition by avoiding the conditionalities, and ensure that the trillions that need to flow to developing countries and then build country-led platforms and ultimately co-share the risk with the private sector. Critically, both adaptation and loss and damage should be put on equal footing, one would argue, with mitigation investment. The developed world needs to put real money on the table here and now, while ensuring the credibility of its commitments, particularly those in partnership with the private sector. So in short, a welcome geopolitical truce between the US and China is absolutely necessary, but surely it's not necessarily sufficient condition for the ambitious outcome in Glasgow. What COP26 arguably needs is a combination of and a coalition for ambition, credibility, and solidarity. And so with that in mind, I'd like to now welcome our special guest star, which is María Mendelucci, coming to us all the way from, not Glasgow, but Geneva. Now, María is the CEO of the Women Business Coalition, formerly the Managing Director of Climate and Energy at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And I have not actually had the chance to see María in face-to-face 3D for what, a good 3 years, I think it is, María. It's been such a long time between drinks. So in that regard, let me open up by the question that I think I put to you last, but I'll make it first. how many days are you going to allow you and your team to sleep after this COP is finished?
Well, thank you. I think we all need to sleep, right? Because with this Zoom life that we live, yeah, the work has been really intense in the past few months. In fact, this was the most important thing that has happened in the past 2 years on the climate movement. So I'm back in Geneva and I'm recovering my daily life balance, which I think helps a lot as well. And yes, we all need to sleep a lot, but then there's a lot of work ahead. So let's recover, reflect, and relaunch for COP27.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of COP, how's it going in your view? How is it progressing?
Well, I have a very positive view of this COP more than ever. Of course, there are some things that still remain. We came to COP wanting 1.5 to be alive, and I think 1.5 is in intensive care, but it's within reach. The IEA says that is 1.8 with if all the pledges were implemented. But of course, that's taking into account the long-term plans. When you come to the NDCs, more effort needs to be done. Carbon tracker position is at 2.4. What we are quite hopeful is that the ratchet mechanism will be regularly used by countries until they reach the objective of halving emissions by 2030, which is the thing that we need to do to keep 1.5 within reach. So that's going well. Now, of course, and I love your tracker. It's really accurate. So hurdles remain on Article 6. And that's what is being discussed at the moment. But Brazil has changed their position. They have changed their Minister of Environment. So we hope that it will go smoother, but this is what the Brazilians told me at COP. But you never know, because there's always a surprise. Last minute, someone that wants to get something out of these negotiations. But I think it would be a shame for negotiators if they don't finish the Paris rulebook, right? It's been 6 years to finalize one article. Okay, come on. So I think that's good. And now some debate about whether we include the 1.5 or not in the text, the removal of fossil fuel subsidies, etc. So that remains. I think that would be even a bonus. So it's going good, going well.
It's going well. Okay. What's your view about this COP? How different is it to other COPs? I think you've probably been to more than I have, but just as an outsider, literally on the other side of the world, it's had a very different tone, a very different texture, a very different feel as to the way in which it has progressed. And, things like the leaders at the beginning, the veritable smorgasbords of pledges and announcements, and even the role of youth this time, rather than being agitated from without, seemed to be far more engaged from within. And of course, the Australian Pavilion, which apparently had the best coffee. What's your view about whether or not this COP is any different to the other COPs that have gone before this one?
Yeah, well, I think, were you in Paris, Andrew?
Yes.
Yes, no? Yes, I remember that, yeah. So I think in Paris, companies, well, I'm going to talk more about the business side, okay? Because I spoke about the political side in the previous question. So to Paris, companies came, trying to understand the what could they do, okay? And from there, we started a few initiatives like the Science-Based Targets Initiative and many others that were moving into targets, right? And so now at this COP, we have 2,000 companies that have committed to set science-based targets, and of which 1,000 have committed to 1.5. And that is going to become the new baseline for company targets, okay? So now at the corridors at COP, it was more about the how, rather than the what or the why. The how fast can you get there? How much can you how fast can you reduce by 50% your emissions, kind of thing? And then how much, because we had the financial sector come in for the first time in masses, right? So I think this is really positive. The pledges were also very positive because, the COP processes, once they finalize Article 6, there's not that much. It's about global stocktake. So it's a lot about those bilateral deals that are done between or multilateral deals that do not necessarily include the 190 countries. So I think this is very positive. Now, there was two COPs. There is the one inside that was very positive, and the one outside in the street with the youth protesting. No, that was more sour, I would think. And, the youth are frustrated, and some of the activists, they think we could go fast. And while I think we all want to go fast, it takes some time between someone makes a pledge and delivers results, right? So I suppose we need to be patient. And because on the run up to COP, so many countries, companies are announcing pledges, they say, yeah, but there's no results. And yeah, it's normal because they have not started to implement the pledges, right? So I think the communication, yeah, it has been positive, has created a momentum, but on the other hand, some frustrations by some. Now, what I tell businesses is that the people that are marching in the streets are the young people that will be working for businesses and governments going forward. And so it is very clear what the new talent wants, right? And so there are many reasons why business should act, no? One is attracting talent, and what consumers want, and we're here in the street. Investors that want to decarbonize the portfolio, regulations that are really going to transform the system, and all that is creating a flurry of innovation within companies. Because when you have those forces that are pushing companies to decarbonize faster, then companies realize, put in place incentives, and then we see good progress. Now, let me answer to the question about the coffee, okay? I didn't drink your coffee, but we have a coffee barista, Fluvio, from Italy, who was the best of the best. So there you could choose whether you have an espresso machine or a coffee barista. And I can tell you that there was a huge difference, no disrespect to Nespresso, but our Fluvio made the best coffee. So I don't know, we'll have to ask someone more impartial.
We'll call it a draw then. You're talking quite a lot about the role of business and the pledges that have been made. What's your observation about the role and engagement of business at this COP, particularly in contrast to, and you've highlighted Paris? They seem to have been very engaged, very eager under SDG 17 to be very much in partnership with civil society and governments to play a substantive role. And that the thing that's most struck me is how much pre-planning seems to have gone on by business with government to making announcements that are critical, they're substantive, and as you say, they're pledges, which according to a number of people, well, they're only pledges, but the stark contrast is that the market will hold them to account for those particular pledges. So I'm interested, particularly as you've been dealing with business for what, a good 12, 18, if not 24 months in the preparation for this COP. What have you seen as their role at this particular COP?
Yes, well, I think there's two roles. On one hand, businesses are voicing their ambition and their wish for governments to be more ambitious. And that's providing confidence to business, to governments to go further, right? We have seen this in Europe with the Euro 55, the NDC. We mobilized more than 400 companies in the US and wrote a letter to President Biden, and they heard us, and they say, and here we are, much more ambition. And even in Turkey, well, I don't read Turkish, but we had this G20 letter that was signed by a lot of Turkish people, and that was it was included in the media from Turkey. How funny it was that the Turkish government also raised their ambition and have their NDCs, which was the first one from developing countries. So we know that what we call the ambition loop works, right? And so it's important for companies to voice this. Now, I think companies are worried because governments sometimes don't go as fast. And I think in your country is very clear an example of that, right? Because there is an ups and downs, the change leaders, and then it's a bit of a mess, right? Because one says something, the other one,
a bit of a roller coaster, yes.
Okay, so the business are here to stay, right? For 20, 50, 100 years. And hence, they're just going forward, they're going forward. Of course, when a government is favorable, then they can go even further. Okay, and more companies will join. But we have seen many US companies being very engaged in the Trump years, and they're going forward. And so this is what I'm seeing, that businesses, even also philanthropy, and then we have Bill Gates that was in our pavilion signing deals, are just not waiting for governments. They just are going forward. But of course, it will help a lot if the government, was more consistent in their positions and more thorough as well in delivering their plans.
Yes, it would be lovely. It would be almost nirvana, actually. But we'll wait to see. And as you may be aware, Australia is going to go through an election, if not this year, then the beginning of next year. So who knows what the policy will look like at the end of that particular democratic process. Let's pivot now to the work of Women Business Coalition, because it has been profound. It's been far-reaching, and it comes as no surprise to the BCSDAustralia audience to know that Women Business has been very supportive of the work of BCSDAustralia, particularly in the last few weeks around the COP in particular. But I'm interested for you to share with us as to, I guess, the genesis of the program since you started there, and what have you seen as the success stories that have come through during COP that have been led by or collaborated in with Women Business Coalition?
Yeah, thank you. So Women Business was created back in 2014 with the intention of rallying the most influential business leaders on climate, to set ambitious targets and to work with governments so that the Paris Agreement will come to light and the implementation of it. I took over from Nigel Toppin 18 months ago. Nigel Toppin used to be the CEO. Now he's the high-level champion.
High-level champion, yep.
And well, it's been a very interesting journey. I think and we have restructured the organization, refresh the strategy. We have gotten long-term funding because we're funded by foundations, and then we distribute the funding. And we're just like putting the house in order and putting in place the systems for it to be more effective. Right. I knew I did it already for the WBCSD, that it was important to have a place at COP. So we did it at COP21 with WBCSD. It was all open for business. So I told my team that we needed to do this at COP for the Women Business family. Women Business is a really collaborative. It's all about collaborative leadership. So we work with our 7 founding partners, but we have around 50 implementation partners, of which Australia BCSD is one of them. So we wanted to create a house for all of those partners at COP, a place where they could have their events, whether it was in person or digitally, and also a place where they could meet. And it's been an outstanding success.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have around 50 organizations doing events. We have Bill Gates spend a full morning there signing deals. We saw leaders, environmental ministers, CEOs, a lot of people that found a place where they could meet and they could work. Yeah, and also this COP was really special because coming out of the COVID pandemic, so it was the first time that we saw each other. So it was kind of, someone characterized it like, we're here with the tribe, right? Because we've been working for many years. So it was actually, quite extraordinary. And then we had a beautiful backdrop that it was all in for 1.5. Are you in? And many people use this, to do their pictures, etc., and filming videos. So also from a communication perspective, the message was very clear. Now that's on the setup and convening. Now, in terms of the messages, before COP, we organized a letter that we sent to G20 leaders with very concrete tasks. And we had around 800 companies that signed the letter. And it has marked the key areas for us to advocate for at COP. And those are going quite well. So I think having a very clear messaging, a place to convene, and now we are following up in the last days of the negotiation trying to influence so that the world and that business thing will reduce to more investment should be included. So anyway, that's what we're doing now. So it's been quite successful.
Yeah, and we BCSD Australia sent that letter to Prime Minister Morrison, admittedly hours before he got on the plane to the G20, but we did get it to his office as a rallying call as well, and it was heartening for the membership to absolutely support that. So it was very very good, even though we didn't necessarily see at that particular time, but who knows, the dividends of that particular enterprise. What for you personally has been the success to date of WMB at the COP? What's really, you gone, wow, that was pretty good. I'm glad we did that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think we mean business because we support our partners, we fund them. We don't execute some of it. We are more the designer, the orchestrator, the coordinator, and the rapporteur, the one that talks about it. So many people didn't know about us, and so I think now people know women business a little bit better and the role that we play, and it's very much welcome. I think the business community appreciates that we give a very clear and simple communications and stories on why they should be part of it, what should they do, where should they focus, how should they do it, because we have a leadership framework that is very easy to follow. And I do think that as in the business organizations, there is a lot of fragmentation, and the companies are a little bit tired of this, and so they ask us to try to merge and converge, and that's what I try to do, and we try to do, or at least have a very clear story on how the different initiatives fit together, so that we can use the resources that we can be stronger by doing that together in a coordinated way, and we can go faster if we do so.
Yeah.
So I think,
I think, and as an outsider, well, a part insider, but ostensibly outsider from the other side of the world, it's that convening power that you have as an organization, and the role of complementarity. So it's almost that, how do I put this carefully? It's the climate house of Gucci, in the sense that it has so many different brands, and yet you can see a consistent theme coming through from each one of them about wanting to work together for that end purpose. And that's been such a joy to be part of. Last question, and this may come as a shock to the audience, but we might actually finish a tiny bit early. The last question is, what would you say to Australian business that's thinking about starting to go to work on going net zero? And what are the tools that are going to be able to help them get there?
Yeah, well, I'll say that, and coming back to the start of the conversation, I think it makes a lot of business sense to go to net zero because the people are asking for it, your talent, your employees. The investors are really worried and looking how to decarbonize their portfolios and reduce their risks. Regulation is going to come, and it's going to come sooner or later in Australia as well, and in the countries where you operate. The business, the consumers are demanding, because there is an interesting thing that now is becoming very, very, very important, is that the supply chain emissions of companies is the largest part of the footprint, between 50 and 95%, which means that the business can very well manage their own emissions, Scope 1 and Scope 2. But when it comes to Scope 3, it's really complicated, because it means investing maybe in a company that is not your own, right? So the space for collaboration is supply chain. If the actors get together and help that supply chain decarbonize, then it has a multiplier effect, because you have your supply chain, but you're also part of multiple supply chains.
Yeah.
And created interesting feedback loops. And so all this is generating a lot of innovation. Now, when it comes to tools, I think first the companies need to commit to set science-based targets in the SBTi, because and a net zero target through that, because it is externally validated.
Yeah.
It is not, what we have seen a lot of companies say, I commit to do this, but it's just like a lot of talk, and no one is validating that commitment is real, or it follows certain rules, right? Now the rules are there. Before they were not, but now there is a net zero standard, and so the rules are very clear.
Yep.
So that plant needs to decarbonize as maximum the emissions 90%. So the use of nature offsets, yes, is welcome to compensate for the additional 10% that is needed, but it cannot replace the decarbonization of the company. Then there are different tools. So WBCSD is working on the SOS 1.5, but multiple organizations are doing similar work. And finally, there are a few initiatives that you can join. Mission Possible Partnership is looking how to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sector, and within that, creating some demand clubs so that we demand to the supply industry, to sell products that are zero emissions, like zero carbon steel or zero carbon concrete, which will be very important. And finally, we launched the Sme Climate App, which is a one-stop shop for SMEs to commit to net zero, where they have access to tools, incentives, education programs, etc. So also engaging with SMEs is an important part of the journey. So it's not going to be easy, right? But I think there is a movement going in that direction, and it's becoming easier and easier because the frameworks and tools are becoming available for companies to just replicate without the need to reinvent some of those.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Won't be easy, but as I said at the top end, we're all in it together. There's a solidarity around, I think, increasingly by government, even in Australia to a certain extent, and business and civil society to be part of the forging of the solution to decarbonise Australia's economy as quickly as possible, and that reinforced by a poll after survey after poll after survey in this country. So let me just wrap up very quickly with, I was going to show this, which was your quote that came through quite recently in relation to the final text. And it was such a great quote: business welcoming for the first time at COP. Countries included the need to accelerate the phase out of coal and fossil fuel subsidies in the latest draft text. And it'll be interesting to see if that particular text remains. But as you can imagine, that's text that is very interesting to Australians. So I thought it was highly relevant to this particular conversation. So just to be clear to everyone that whilst we may be in the in-throes of Friday the 12th of November, the other side of the world is about to start, and that is technically the close of negotiations, although I did read this morning that both Prime Minister Johnson and Alok Sharma are saying, yay, we might need a little bit of extra time. So as Maria and I know, that means you never book up until the 12th. You always book one day extra just in case, and probably take another pair of underwear just because you haven't had a chance to launder anything whilst you've been at the COP. But for us tomorrow, what we're going to be doing is hopefully a wrap up, and that wrap up will come from dear friends in the media. We've got Tina Perinotto from the Fifth Estate, Rachel Allen-Barkis from FS Sustainability, and then a dear and treasured friend, Murray Hogarth, will be dialing in to give us his thoughts on what the heck has been going on in these COPs for the last umpteen years. So let me once again thank Maria Mendelucci for joining us today. It was such a joy to have you. And can I say on behalf of Tony Gawley and the team at ImpactX, thank you so much for the contribution to the conference last week. It was very well received, and I know a lot of people stayed up quite late at night to watch you on ABC Business Insider, including myself. So you're quite a rock star now in Australia by dint of 3 appearances in 2 weeks. And thank you to WMB for the support they've given to BCSD Australia, particularly over the last couple of years. It's been highly valued, and we hope that we've returned that value and trust back into the work that we've been doing. For now, though, thank you. As always, I end by saying respect the science, respect nature, and respect each other. I'm Andrew Petersen. Thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye for now. Bye.